So we're actually going to move next first to our one of our first keynote speaker, Victoria Buchanan, and then move to Paul Harper later. So I'm really excited to introduce Victoria. So I suppose Victoria is the Director of the Disability and Learning Support Service at the University of Edinburgh. She has a master's degree in Education Inclusive Practice and has 20 years experience in the student support domain. I suppose the reason Victoria is here from a more personal level is just witnessing the really, really powerful work that she is doing in Edinburgh University, and that the university has been on the journey of for quite a long time now, of beginning to examine what's happening in the space of reasonable accommodations for disabled learners and seeing how they can begin to design more of that into the mainstream experience and I suppose take a more universal design approach to how those things are delivered. So if you please put your hands together, Victoria Buchanan, and if you're there, there she is.
Hello, I have my notes on my laptop, so I'm just going to Hi everybody, and hi to everybody online. Thanks to Dara for inviting me. I've never been to this conference before, and it's really exciting agenda, so I'm really pleased that I've been invited to talk to you, and I hope that what I say is useful. So as Dara said, I'm the Director of the Disability and Learning Support Service in the University of Edinburgh. I've been there for 8 years, and before that I did nearly 14 years working in further education. So I'm really pleased that this is not just a higher education conference. If I'm honest, probably FE is where my passion lies. Although I do love my job, but further education genuinely changes learners' lives. So I'm really excited to have some conversations with some of you today. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about how we mainstream adjustments at the University of Edinburgh. This is a really, really big topic, so I hope that I'm covering things that are useful for you. I'm happy to have any chats about any of this stuff. This is, like I said, quite a big thing. So I've got words prepared, and hopefully it covers what you're asking for today. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to start today with this slide, which outlines disabled student statistics over the past 10 years at the University of Edinburgh. And as you can see, it's a steady upward trajectory, and it shows a 12.8% increase in a 10-year period. This picture will no doubt be familiar. It doesn't really matter that this is University of Edinburgh statistics. This picture is replicated across the sector, regardless of the size, scale, or type of institution that you work in. And of course, there are some real positives to seeing this increase in disclosure rates, because this represents a well overdue reduction in stigma, a better societal understanding of what defines disability in all of its unique forms, and an increased willingness for students, and particularly young people, to ask for the help they need. And I think we can all agree that's incredibly positive. However, for probably most of us in this room, this also represents a significant increase in workload. And as you will no doubt be aware, there really hasn't been a comparative increase in staffing resource in any meaningful way to meet this demand. And I say that standing here representing an affluent, world-leading university that also hasn't been able to increase its disability support staffing. So this means we're in a difficult position. Over the past 10 years, the picture has shifted so much. Disability services cannot keep doing the same things over and over, expecting and hoping that yesterday's processes will work to meet the demands of the present, and just hoping that things will calm down in future. So, what can we do? I've done a nice little Venn diagram that try to explain the kind of place that we're at. So where we are can feel a little bit like being stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's not just the increasing numbers of disabled students, but it's the increasing complexities within that. Often it's the systemic barriers you will all be familiar with in an education environment that increase the complexity. It's not always complexity situated within the individual. And I think that's really important to note. Yes, there can be complex individuals, and it's usually related to mental health conditions and managing risk. But often it's not the people themselves that are complex. It's the rigidity of the environment that presents the challenges. So these cases can take time to handle properly. There is no quick way to manage the support for this group of students, and nor should there be. This is where we should be focusing our energies, either because they are genuinely complex or because this is where the fight should be to make things better for them. But then another important factor is the greater number of disabled students who are less complicated, at least on paper. So maybe they've got a single diagnosis, just one standalone condition, although that is increasingly rare. Maybe they know exactly what they need to support their studies, and that's brilliant, but there's lots of them. And that also takes time to get through hundreds of student appointments to try and assess their needs, and trying to do that within a pressured time frame to ensure that the crucial support is in place. And then while these students are active in our institutions, the implementation of the adjustments they need falls to the teaching staff. It's hard to keep up with what they all need and to understand how to adapt your teaching practice. And then the final part of this picture is our staff, the disability practitioner experts and the specialist student support staff. As I'm sure we all know, the people who work in this field do so because they care. These are empathetic, kind, and compassionate staff. These people try incredibly hard to help everyone, often to the detriment of their own well-being. So how do we even start to try and address this complex problem? Well, the approach we've taken at Edinburgh is to stop assessing each student in person. Simply put, if we were to continue to do that, our students would be waiting until their second semester to have any adjustments in place, and that's not in any way inclusive. Instead, we use an online process that gathers as much information from the student as possible, and in most cases, we put standard adjustments, things like extra time or coursework extensions, in place straight away without the need for an appointment. A triage process filters through the students who our specialist staff assess as more complex, and they're seen one-to-one. So this has ensured that the majority of disabled students now have adjustments in place before they submit their first assessments and before they sit their first exams. Our specialist disability advisors do not have unmanageable caseloads of hundreds. They have fewer students that they can focus on more directly. It's impossible to continue performing at a gold or platinum service standard, which is what we aspire to do at this scale and pace. Our students are waiting too long, and our staff are burning out. Nobody wins. We have to make space for disability teams to focus on those with higher needs. We must simplify the actions that our teaching staff can take to support our disabled students. So now really is the time to push for UDL and inclusive practice. You're pushing on an open door. So the most significant practical step an institution can take is to implement at a policy level common reasonable adjustments made available to all students. Many of you will have something similar already in place, but for those of you who don't, consider this your call to arms. The University of Edinburgh has had an accessible and inclusive learning policy in place since 2013. This was really groundbreaking at the time. In 2023, it was revised with much more focus on UDL principles. Now, I'm in a fortunate position as I wasn't working at the university in 2013, so I can't really take credit for the initial push to get this through, but I did do the revision in 2023, and it is due for renewal this academic year, which is going to be a very big piece of work. So these 8 baseline standards that you can see on the slide here are the most basic level of accessibility that all students should expect. We should not be requiring students to register with a disability service to get an adjustments plan, just to get a lecturer to wear a microphone or to have slides in advance. But if we don't clearly tell academics that this is what they need to do, they won't all do it. Not usually because they don't believe that they should, I think that's really important to note. But usually because they're so busy, they can't figure out how to approach this. So writing it down is really what you need to do in a policy. Oh, sorry, I'm not on that one yet, sorry. So establishing such a policy is not straightforward. As I said, I can't take credit for it being initially started at Edinburgh, but you fundamentally need to have buy-in from senior stakeholders and academics. It can't be a policy that originates only from centralised student services. If you don't already have a policy in place, you need to find your senior ally or be prepared to convince one, whoever that is. To get the policy off the ground in 2013 took a lot of committees, meetings, and a lot of pushback. This doesn't happen overnight, and there are many challenging conversations ahead. It's worth emphasising to your senior leaders that a strong UDL approach improves the whole student experience, as I think everyone in this room knows. It's not just for disabled students. Depending on your context, it might be helpful to highlight the benefit to other disadvantaged student groups or even international students. Measurable improvements to student satisfaction rates can be a powerful leverage. And there's evidence for this. Not everyone, unfortunately, is motivated to improve disabled students' experiences, but increased student satisfaction rates across the board is a language that senior management understand. Know your audience and pitch accordingly. So now I have my next slide. So creating the policy is a really, really big step, and the impact on the student experience is highly positive, but it's only one step on the journey. These adjustments are basic, they're not pushing the envelope. And like I said, we've had it since 2013, we're trying to shift things now. So we have deliberately shifted the language from mainstream adjustments. When the policy was published in 2013, the baseline standards were referred to as mainstream adjustments, and we've shifted the language to baseline standards. This positions the 8 adjustments as standard expectations for all delivery, and that creates space for broader conversations around mainstreaming and practice at a school or faculty level beyond the policy expectations. Mainstreaming can create challenging conversations, both with academic staff, but also with disabled students themselves. We've actually found the biggest challenge is often disabled students feeling that they're entitled to more than their peers, and that if everyone receives the same mainstreamed adjustment, that they will automatically be disadvantaged. This is particularly the case with extra time, which can be viewed as an entitlement rather than a means to removing a disadvantage. So I'm just going to note here that in case you are not aware, there are 2 research papers from Duncan and Purcell that evidence that extra time does not confer an advantage to disabled students. We rely on that quite heavily. Simply put, more words do not equal more marks, as any of you who have done marking will know, I'm sure. Our medium-term strategy is to really develop confidence in mainstream practices. The conversation has really shifted at Edinburgh, in no small part due to the impact of the recent Aberhart versus University of Bristol legal ruling. It's tragic that it took a student suicide case to force the sector to take huge strides forward in improving inclusive practice within higher education. I've been at the forefront of this work at Edinburgh, and we're now having incredibly positive conversations with academics who suddenly seem to get it. They're understanding the necessity of anticipating the needs of disabled students and incorporating UDL into course design at the outset. They understand that good inclusive practice can reduce the administrative workload for both teaching staff and students. I also want to highlight here that some of our degree programs underpinned by professional regulations, our vet school and law school, for example, have been hugely positive adopters of mainstreaming practice. This is really interesting, as it's an often touted defense as to why academic areas cannot be more inclusive. If you do need case studies to bolster your arguments, please feel free to use these as examples. If they can do it, surely most other areas can too. It's important to state that none of this reduces the need for individual reasonable adjustments. None of this will take away the specialist jobs, which some of our staff are a little bit worried about. If UDL worked perfectly, there wouldn't really be that much need for disability service staff, but we're not in that future yet, are we? Because we know that the need is still great. Those numbers at the start of my presentation, they're still going up. But it does reduce the number of students who need direct involvement from disability services. It's not a perfect solution, but it does give everyone a little bit of breathing space. The Bristol case shone a light on the legal duty to make adjustments for disabled students in a way that's never happened before. If your institution does not yet have robust inclusive learning policies in place, you should really be thanking the Abrahart family for their incredible grit in pursuing justice for Natasha. There has never been a bigger wake-up call to the sector, and it cannot be ignored. So the Bristol ruling made it crystal clear that support for disabled students has to be a whole institution approach. The responsibility cannot begin and end with disability services. UDL is a crucial piece in the puzzle for supporting students, and building professional relationships between support staff and academics is also absolutely crucial to making UDL work. But I often hear about a divide between academic staff and professional support staff, and I often have people asking how we've managed to engage academic staff so well at Edinburgh. As we all know, building trust and respect in any relationship takes time. This is not work that you can complete quickly, and it does take work. It's about consistency, showing up, listening, and working collaboratively to problem solve together. As it happens, these are exactly the skills that our disability practitioners and specialist support staff are really, really good at. This is the approach that we naturally take with students. However, it seems these skills are not always naturally employed when we approach our academic colleagues, and I'm not really sure why. But these are the approaches that work with people. I can only talk of my own experience when I moved from direct student support work into line management. It really became clear that there's a lot of transferable skills. Supporting students can be incredibly similar to supporting staff. People have similar wants and needs. It's not really any different for senior academics. We're on the same team and working towards the same aim. So the secret as to how this works at Edinburgh, and I would say it does, it really does, is deceptively simple. We have a named contact for each academic school, and that contact has put in legwork over time to develop relationships with staff. We're fortunate that our departmental structure means that this named contact sits at the management level, which does add some credibility, and it does increase our invitations to team meetings and committees and lots of things like that. Over time, we've become to be viewed as essential partners in supporting their course delivery, although there is a word of caution here because it does generate more work. We can sometimes spend more than 50% of our time each week engaging with academic schools and talking about their complex cases, but that's important work to be done, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, it's just on top of everything else. So I guess I would say, and I know we have got academic staff in the room today, do not be intimidated by academic experts. They need our help and they need our expertise. Approach conversations with curiosity and empathy, not rigidity or a resistance to understanding. Trust can only be built over time. If you provide your expert guidance on tricky cases, be confident in your own expertise and specialism, and most importantly, be consistent. So I want to finish today by giving a final word to our students to demonstrate that the most important people in the process, the students, the changes that we've made to our approaches at University of Edinburgh are really paying off. I am a bit conflicted with this because I don't want to show off or boast, and that really doesn't come naturally to me. But at the same time, I'm really proud of what we've achieved, and I'm so happy that our students are happy. We survey our students annually, and we have hundreds of positive comments. These are just some that are illustrative. I honestly had probably about 800 that I could have chosen from. So at Edinburgh, our disabled student satisfaction rate is at 97%. When students register with our disability service, 87% have key individual adjustments in place within 48 hours. We've come a really, really long way. I genuinely believe that UDL has been a big part of these improvements. Of course, I'd be lying if I said it was perfect. Some of our academic schools are more resistant than others. You can't win them all. And sometimes complex disabled students still slip through the net. And sometimes things can go wrong really quickly. We can't always get it right for everyone. Serious complaints do happen, and sometimes things are out of our control to fix. The student experience at course level can sometimes just not be brilliant, despite our best efforts. However, personally, I have gone from having frequent, difficult, and frustrating conversations with academic teams to genuinely having some of the most rewarding and productive discussions I've had in my professional career. It feels really good to be making positive changes for disabled students and positive changes for the whole university community. So I'd just end by saying this approach works. Try it, believe in it, bring as many allies with you as you can, do the work, and most importantly, persevere. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Do you want me
Victoria.
to
If you
take
want to
some
stay up,
questions?
yeah, if you want to stay up
Yeah.
there. So we're just, I'm not sure if there's any questions on Slido yet. We have one question, so we're just going to take one from the Slido first. Oh, we get the second mic on, please.
So one person has asked, have you had any adjustments or needs that couldn't be met for a student? How do you approach both engaging with the student and tackling those systemic barriers?
And just while Victoria is chewing on that question, just if anybody wants to raise their hand for a question in the room, we'll get a mic to you then.
Sorry, was that question if we had, can you repeat that, sorry?
No problem. Have you had any adjustments or needs that couldn't be met for a student? How do you approach both engaging with the student and tackling those systemic barriers?
That's kind of two questions. Yes, we have students whose needs we can't meet, and sometimes it's their expectations, to be honest, and it might be about the type of program that they're going into. I would say at the moment, it's the ones where we've had most challenges where the reasonableness of the request is perhaps not reasonable in the context in which they're asking. And then the second part of that about systemic barriers, there absolutely are systemic barriers, and particularly with some of our professional programs. So again, we're a big university with lots and lots of different academic schools, and there's a hell of a lot of courses that are underpinned by professional regulations, and some of that is very rigid. So we're just working with the academic teams to try and break down some of that. And as I said, some of our schools are doing really well with this. Our vet school are brilliant, and they are underpinned by professional regs, as is the law school, which is quite fascinating, really, because often law is very rigid, but we've got some really excellent academic staff. It does help when you have a particularly complex student or a student that they've not had to support before. I'm sure you'll all have noticed this. If you get a student into an academic area where they've never had, for example, a blind student before, all of a sudden they're really, really keen to engage with the disability service and start thinking about how to remove systemic barriers. So that does help, where we've seen increasing numbers of students, because when they've got a real life case, they can really understand as to why they need to do things, and then that changes practice moving forward for new students. Sorry, I don't think I've answered that particularly well. That was quite a difficult question. Thank you for that one.
I think we have one over here.
Hi. Hi, John.
Hi, Victoria. So I'm John Harding from the University of Cambridge. So Victoria and I know each other and worked together well. So I'm going to try and not ask you a difficult question. But
Okay.
you talked about the areas, the faculties, departments where this worked well. Have you experienced any resistance in other areas of the university?
Are you asking me to name and shame? Oh, that's tricky. Yes, there are some academic schools where we don't hear much from them unless something's gone really wrong, and then they want us just to fix it, which can be quite frustrating. I won't name and shame, but it's often not the professional courses, I would say. And I would love to name and shame. There's one in particular that I've had some really, really difficult conversations with, and they're just not getting it, and they're very rigid, and I think they'll have a legal case pending that they want me to defend. That'll be fun. But I guess thinking about other areas of the university, I feel like we've got most people on board. This is really difficult for me. I don't want to stand here and boast and say everything's amazing, but we talk to everyone. I feel like I've worked at the university for 8 years, and so much of our work now is outward facing in the university and talking. We get asked to do so much. So we engage with the states, with the accommodation team, with the information services team, the pre-arrival and induction team. People come to us to ask us what they can do to be more inclusive and to ask us to come and talk to their staff. It's great. It does make our job more complicated. And so myself, I'm the director. I've got 4 assistant directors. I know I'm very fortunate. But again, more than 50% of our week could be taken up with that kind of work when we've also got staff to manage, students to manage, and everything like that. So I really could do with more staff, but hey, that's not going to happen. So yeah, I think broadly we've got people on board. Even our student association have been quite good, to be honest, but that varies depending on who comes in, obviously. But thank you for your question.
Sure, we think we have another one over here.
Hi, Victoria.
Hi.
My name is Anne Hannon. I work at CTCT College EDI officer in Dublin. Thank you very much. I just have a question around the surveys. You mentioned doing lots of surveys, and I find with our EDI students that they're less likely than the normal cohort to complete surveys. One survey, not to mind multiple. And I just wondered, had you any, with survey fatigue, had you any tips around, maybe it's the wording, maybe it's who's asking the students to complete the survey, but if you'd any advice around that, that would be fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm someone who likes to count everything, and I have stats for everything. Mainly because I worked in further education, and I'm aware of how budget cuts can happen very quickly, and it justifies our staffing if we've got good data. That includes good student data, but you're totally right about survey fatigue. So we have, when we register students with our service, they can opt in or opt out, but we count surveys as essential. So we would survey even the ones who've opted out of comms. We only actually survey them definitely twice a year, and sometimes 3 times. So the first survey we put out after the start of semester, and we ask them after it's about 10 weeks into this term, and we ask them if they're getting their adjustments. So the question is, are you receiving all of your adjustments? And if not, come and talk to us, so that we know where it's working. So the survey response to that is high because it's not that many questions. It's really not, and it's an important one because you do get the bias of people who are having a negative experience are the ones that are most likely to respond. But that also tells us where we need to do things. And then our final survey is about timing. We need to try and avoid revision periods, exam period. Actually, no, sorry. We put it out in revision period last year. Do you know what? That was a very good tactic. There's a tip for you, because a hell of a lot of students will do anything to avoid revising. And they're online, they're at the computer, but they're doing their procrastination thing. We got a really good response last year. I forgot about that. That's a really hot tip for you. We also put a prize on it as well. We do 2 or 3, I think, Amazon vouchers, 50 quid or something like that. And we just pick some names out. So they've got some motivation to do it. We keep the survey quite brief. Again, there is bias of the people who are having a really bad experience. Definitely complete the survey and definitely fill in all of the free text boxes and tell you how awful everything is. But that is weighted very nicely by people who then write really nice things about, again, really nice things about our staff, often naming particular staff that we can pass on as really positive feedback. So yeah, fewer surveys, targeted questions, think about your timing, and offer a little incentive if you can. And I know that does rely on budget, but even if you can offer one voucher, it does tend to do it. But yeah, revision period worked very well.
So I'm going to take my MC privilege to ask the last question. We have about 2 or 3 minutes left. I was just wondering about the reaction of the students. I mean, I know you weren't there maybe when the policy initially came in, but you may have some insight into it. I know there's some fears, particularly in the areas of, say, where we're trying to mainstream more assessment adjustments and things like that, that become available to all students rather than those registered with the service. So I was just wondering about generally what the reaction of students was in that, especially in that initial early phase. Was there some convincing to be done with the group that were registered with you?
No, the students responded really positively to the initial 2013 and in general the accessible and inclusive learning policy. I think mainly because the mainstreamed adjustments as they were and now baseline standards aren't really that controversial. It's, you know, use a microphone, get slides in advance. There's nothing that's seen as advantageous there. The pushback we are getting, as I said, we're really trying to shift from that as a baseline standard into more mainstreamed practice, and we are seeing academic teams mainstream extra time, and honestly some of our disabled students are really against that, and that's quite difficult because it is perceived that it's an entitlement to have extra time rather than removing the barrier in the first place so that everyone has enough time. So there's frequent individual students who really complain about that, and that can be really difficult for the staff on the ground, as in the teaching staff, when they're trying to do that. And it can come through at various things. So we've got some, I'm sure you'll have the same, some exams are like 24-hour exam window, and that's plenty of time. But we have some students who still are like, but I'm entitled to more time. And it's just, you just end up in a kind of loop of arguing with them, which isn't a very good student experience. And I don't have a brilliant answer to that. I would be very happy to have conversations if anyone has got a good answer to that. You just end up with individual students in a negative loop with it, which is really disappointing. Like, disappointing is not the right word. It's difficult, and I can see their position, and it makes them more stressed often before their assessments. But the staff in general were more challenging. When in 2013, when that policy was introduced, it was the staff that were pushing back on it, on things like microphones, on things like this. Students can record on their personal device. There's huge stress about what people would do with that they might post it online and all of this, and academic, what's the word? Like their property, yeah. That so I'm really impressed they managed to get that through in 2013. Where I was working in 2013, we had lecturers on strike with the concept of an individual student recording on their own device. They would leave the room and not teach. And
now that's become more culturally embedded.
Yeah.
You're not seeing that anymore.
No, and we're seeing more. I mean, there's I don't know how many hundreds. There's about 800 or something academic staff. There's no way they're all happy with it, I'm going to say that. But they're more aware of it, and it's more common now that everyone has phones that they would record. They're going to their like PhD supervisor sessions and just recording it. And it's more common. So I think that's helped as well. I think, yeah, it's a different picture now.
Can everyone give a huge round of applause to Victoria? I could talk to you all day.